Hello viewers, welcome back to my channel Legal Decipher. In the previous video, we had discussed about Chapter 17 of the Code of Criminal Procedure 1973. If you have not seen that video, you can go and check it. The link is in the description below. Today, we are going to talk about Chapter 18 of the Code of Criminal Procedure. We'll go through the chapter and try to understand how the Criminal Procedure Code is followed and how the criminal courts work. So if you are new here, you can like and subscribe to my channel so you can get the video notifications. So let's get started. Today we are going to talk about Chapter 18 that deals with trial before a court of sessions. So section 225 says trial to be conducted by public prosecutor. So when a case is tried before the court of sessions, then the prosecution shall be conducted by a public prosecutor. Section 226 talks about opening case for prosecution. Now when the accused appears or is brought before the court of sessions in pursuance of a commitment of the case under section 209 that we have already read in the previous videos, that when a magistrate finds that a case is exclusively tried by the court of sessions, then it commits such case to the court of sessions under section 209. And when such accused appears or is brought before the court in pursuance to the commitment of a case under that section, then the prosecutor shall open his case by describing the charge brought against the accused. So the first thing that will happen after a case is committed to the court of sessions is that the public prosecutor will, in the presence of the accused in an open court, describe the charges that are brought against such accused, and he shall also state by what evidence he proposes to prove the guilt of the accused. Now section 227 talks about discharge. It says, if upon consideration of the record of the case and the documents that are submitted therewith, after hearing the submissions of the accused and the prosecutions in this behalf, if the judge considers that there is not sufficient ground for proceeding against the accused, so after perusing the records, the documents submitted, and after hearing both the sides, if the judge considers that there are no sufficient ground for proceeding against the accused, then he shall discharge the accused and record his reasons for so doing. Now section 228 talks about framing of charge. It says, if after such consideration and hearing as aforesaid, the judge is of the opinion that there is ground for presuming that the accused has committed an offense. So after all the procedures that are followed until now, the judge finds out that the accused has actually committed an offense, or he can be presumed on the grounds of the case that he had accused such that the accused has committed such an offense, then either of the two possibilities arise. Either it is not exclusively triable by the court of sessions, or it is exclusively triable by the court of sessions. Who has to find it? The court of sessions has to find it whether it is exclusively triable by him or not. So if it is exclusively triable by him, then he will proceed with the case and frame a charge against the accused. And if it is not exclusively triable by him, then he may frame a charge against the accused and order the transfer of that case for trial to the chief judicial magistrate or any other judicial magistrate of the first class. And upon making such order, the accused will have to follow that order. He will have to appear before such court that is mentioned in the order of the court of sessions on that behalf, and thereafter his case will be tried before such magistrate in accordance with the procedure for the trial of a warrant case that is instituted on a police report. So it will be regarded as a warrant case before such magistrate. Now, where the judge frames any charge under clause B of subsection 1, the charge shall be read and explained to the accused, and the accused shall be asked whether he pleads guilty of the charge that is claimed against him or not. So, what happens when the Court of Sessions finds out that the case is exclusively triable by him? He reads over the charge to the accused and asks that accused whether he pleads guilty of such charge or not. Now let's move on to section 229. It talks about conviction on plea of guilty. So say for example, this generally doesn't happen, but say for example, let's presume that if the accused pleads guilty then and there on reading over the charge to him, the court reads over the charge and asks whether you are admitting that you have committed such offense and you plead guilty or not. So if the accused pleads guilty then and there, then the judge shall record such plea and may in his discretion convict him thereon. So the judgment will be passed right there and he will be convicted of such offense, and the judge will think about the punishment as to what sentence will be provided to him. Now section 230 talks about date for prosecution of evidence. So if the accused refuses to plead, this is the general case in almost every cases. This is the general situation in almost all the cases. The accused does not pleads guilty and the trial goes on. So if the accused refuses to plead or does not plead or claims to be tried or is not convicted under section 229, then in all these cases the judge shall fix a date for the examination of witnesses and may, on the application of the prosecution, issue any process of compelling the attendance of any witness or the production of any document or other thing. So if the accused does not plead guilty, then it is the duty of the prosecution to prove his case. Now the prosecution, to prove his case, will apply before the judge to issue process for compelling the attendance of the witnesses upon which the prosecution relies his case, or he may also apply before the judge for production of any document or other thing that is necessary to prove the case. Now section 231 talks about evidence for prosecution. So on the date so fixed, the judge shall proceed to take all such evidence as may be produced in support of the prosecution. So the judge will fix a date for taking evidences, and on that date the prosecution witness will appear or the evidences that are to be produced will be produced. Now the judge may in his discretion permit the cross-examination of any witness to be deferred until any other witness or witnesses have been examined, or recall any witness for further cross-examination. So in regard to examination of the witnesses, the permission to cross-examine the witness can be deferred by the court, and also the court may recall any witness for further cross-examination. These are the powers of the court in regards to examination of a witness. Now section 232 talks about acquittal. So say for example, if after taking the evidence of the prosecution and examination is concluded, and after the hearing of both the parties the judge considers that there is no evidence that the accused committed the offense, so after the entire trial the court finds out that the accused has not committed the offense, then the judge shall record an order of acquittal. Acquittal means to release the accused by admitting that he has not committed the offense that was charged against him. Now section 233 talks about entering upon defense. So when the accused is not acquitted under section 232, say for example the court finds out that there are actually reasons that shows accused may have committed such offense, then the court shall call upon the accused to enter on his defense and adduce any evidence that he may have in support. So on completion of the examination of the prosecution's witness, the defense will be permitted to adduce any witness or evidence that he has in respect of his support. Now, if the accused puts in any written statement, the judge shall file it with the record. So, the accused has the opportunity to put any written statement before the judge, and the judge will consider it by filing it with the record and taking a judicial note upon it. Now, if the accused applies for the issue of any process for compelling the attendance of any witness or the production of any document or thing, then the judge shall issue such process. So, the judge does not only issue the process for compelling the attendance of any witness, production or of any document or thing for the prosecution only, the judge also does the same for the accused if the accused applies before it. Then, but if the judge finds out that such application should be refused on the grounds that it may be made for the purpose of vexation or delay or for defeating the ends of justice, then he may also reject it and record the reasons thereof. Now, section 234 talks about arguments. When the examination of the witness, if any, for the defense is complete, the prosecutor shall sum up his case and the accused or his pleader shall be entitled to reply. So, upon completion of the evidence stage, that is the examination of the witnesses, when it is completed for the both the sides, then the prosecutor shall thereupon sum up his case, and the accused or his pleader shall thereby reply to that sum, provided that where any point of law is raised by the accused or his pleader, the prosecution may, with the permission of the judge, make his submissions with regard to such point of law. So, say for example, there is a point of law that is raised by the accused or his pleader in regard to such case, then the prosecution may, with the permission of the judge, also make his submission with regard to such point of law. So, both the sides will be heard, as we all know, audi alteram partem, which means both the sides will be heard and both the sides will be given equal opportunity to present themselves before the court in regard to a particular case. Now let's move on to section 235 that talks about judgment of acquittal or conviction. So after hearing the arguments and the points of law, the judge shall give a judgment in the case. So the judge will pass a judgment only after hearing both sides' argument. Now, if the accused is convicted, then the judge shall, unless he proceeds in accordance with the provisions of section 360, hear the accused on the questions of sentence and then pass sentence upon him according to law. So first the court declares the accused as a convict, then he passes a judgment or the sentence. Now, in between that period, in between the court finding the accused as a convict and passing the actual sentence on him, in between that period, if accused or his pleader thinks fit, then he may also submit before the court as regard to questions of the sentence, and the court will hear such accused or his pleader on such question of sentence. Now, section 236 talks about previous convictions. It says that if the case is such as there is a previous conviction which is charged against the accused under subsection 7 of section 211 that we have already read when we were discussing about the charge, and the accused does not admit that he had been previously convicted as alleged in the charge. So the accused does not admit that. He says that he was not previously convicted. Then the judge may, after he has convicted the said accused, whether under section 229 or under section 235, take evidence in respect of the alleged previous conviction and shall record a finding thereon. So if the accused is convicted under section 229 or 235 and after that he pleads that he does not admit that he has been previously convicted in an alleged charge, then the court may also take further evidence in respect of such alleged previous conviction and record a finding thereon. Now, provided that no such charge shall be read out by the judge, nor shall the accused be asked to plead unless and until the accused has been convicted under section 229 or section 235. So, the provisions of previous conviction will apply only if the accused is convicted under section 229 or section 235. Let's move on to section 237. This is the last section of this chapter. It talks about procedure in cases instituted under section 199(2). So a court of session who is taking cognizance of an offence under subsection 2 of section 199, he shall try the case in accordance with the procedure for the trial of warrant case. So the case will be dealt like in the manner of a warrant case, instituted otherwise than on a police report before a court of magistrate, provided that the person against whom the offence is alleged to have been committed shall, unless the court of sessions for reasons to be recorded otherwise directs, be examined as a witness for the prosecution. So if the person against whom the offence is alleged has been committed thereof, then unless the court of sessions has reasons that he needs to record or otherwise directs, be examined as a witness for the prosecution. So he will be examined like a prosecution's witness. Now, every trial under this section shall be held in camera if either party thereto so desires or if the court thinks fit so to do. Now, if the either party thinks it is necessary or if the court himself thinks it is necessary, then every trial under this section shall be held in camera. Now, what is in camera? In camera trials are those trials that are conducted in the presence of a very limited persons in the courtroom. Generally, we know that every court proceedings is held at public, which means general people can come to court and the court will try such case in front of the general public. It is done in open. It is considered to be done in open. Now, in camera trials are those special trials that are held in the presence of a very limited number of persons. Say for example, it may only be done in the presence of a judge, his stenographer, and the advocates and parties of both sides. That's all. It may be like that. Whether the procedure will be done in camera or not will be decided by the court, and the amount of persons that are to be present in an in camera trial will also be determined by the court. The court has the power to limit the number of people that are to be present in an in camera trial. Now, if in any such case the court discharges or acquits all or any of the accused, and he is of the opinion that there was no reasonable cause for making the accusation against them or any of them, then he may, by order of discharge or acquittal, direct the person against whom the offence was alleged to have been committed to show cause as to why he should not pay compensation to such accused or to each of any such accused when there are more than one. So, if the court thinks fit that there are no sufficient grounds against the accused which would hold them as a convict, then he may discharge those persons, he may acquit those persons, and after that he may also show cause the person who had alleged such offense, that means the complainant. So the court can show cause the complainant as to why that complainant shall not pay compensation to the accused persons, because if the accused persons are acquitted, then that means the court has come to that conclusion after going through the entire record, the entire evidence, and if there was no such evidence that could prove that the persons who were accused actually did that offense, then basically the complaint was baseless. So the court may in this case order the complainant to show cause as to why he should not be paying compensation to the accused persons for harassing them unnecessarily. Now, say for example, such show cause is submitted before the court by the complainant. Now, the court will record and consider any such cause that is put forward before the court by such person Now, if the court does not find out any reasonable cause for making the accusation, then he may order the compensation against the complainant, which shall not be exceeding 1000 rupees, and it shall be paid by the complainant to the accused persons. Now, compensation awarded under subsection 4 shall be recovered as if it was a fine imposed by a magistrate. So, the procedure of recovering the compensation will be equivalent to that of a recovery of a fine imposed by the magistrate. Now, no person who has been directed to pay compensation under subsection 4 shall, by reason of such order, be exempted from any civil or criminal liability in respect of the complaint made under this section. Now, if a person who has been directed to pay a compensation under subsection 4 shall not be exempted from any civil or criminal liability for the reason of such order in respect of the complaint made under this section, provided that any amount that is to be paid to an accused person under this section shall be taken into account in awarding compensation to such person in any subsequent civil suit relating to the same matter. So, if the accused moves before a civil court subsequently, then such order of compensation will be considered by the civil court as well. Now, the person who has been ordered under subsection 4 to pay compensation may appeal from the order in so far as it relates to the payment of compensation to the High Court. So, the person who has been ordered under subsection 4 to pay the compensation, he may appeal against such order before the High Court. Now, subsection 8 says when an order for payment of compensation to an accused person is made, then the compensation shall not be paid to him before the period allowed for the presentation of the appeal has elapsed, or if an appeal is presented before the appeal has been decided. So, the court has ordered the complainant to pay the accused a compensation, and that compensation will be paid by the complainant to the accused, but after the period of the time that is allotted for presenting an appeal before the higher forum. So, after the elapse of such time, then only complainant will pay the accused such compensation, or if such complainant has not preferred an appeal, or if the complainant has preferred an appeal, then the compensation will have to be paid only after such appeal has been decided. So that's all in this video. If you like my videos, then don't forget to smash the like button and subscribe to my channel. Thank you so much for watching this video.